What's up guys, BioRay here, and welcome back to Dark Souls 2. This is the Crown of the Ivory King's weapon overview. We have 18 of these things to go through, starting off with the Retainer's Short Sword. This sword requires 11 strength, 15 dexterity, and 15 intelligence. It has a base physical damage of 53 points and a magic damage of 60 points. It scales E with strength and dexterity, as well as D in magic. This weapon weighs 1 unit and upgrades on the standard Titanite path. It's basically this DLC's version of a dagger, and it actually looks pretty cool because it's shaped like an icicle. It's kind of comical, really. The moveset itself is actually fairly standard, with the slashing and thrusting. Next on the list is the Charred Loyce Greatsword. This sword requires 25 strength and 28 dexterity. It has a base physical damage of 138 with an additional 60 points to fire damage. It scales with a D in strength, a B in dexterity, and a D with fire. It weighs 9 units and upgrades on the Twinkling Titanite path. This sword is a fairly standard slashing and thrusting type sword. Nothing incredibly special here. Next we have the curved Nil Greatsword. This requires 28 strength and 26 dexterity. It has a base physical damage of 207. It scales at an A with strength and a C in dexterity. It weighs 17 units and upgrades on the Twinkling Titanite path. This sword has a very similar moveset to the Murakumo. When two-handing the weapon, we have a little bit different with the spinning attack. The parry in this weapon is also replaced by a spin. Next up we have the Ice Rapier. This requires 13 strength and 15 dexterity. It has a base physical damage of 169 with 40 bleed damage. It scales with a D in strength and a B in dexterity. It weighs 1.5 units and upgrades on the Twinkling Titanite path. All the light moves are pretty basic for a rapier, but all strong attacks are replaced by a magic projectile. Being a rapier, it can also do the shield poke. Now on to the Rampart Golem Lance. This requires 35 strength and 20 dexterity. It has a base physical damage of 153 with 67 magic. It scales a C with strength and a D with magic. It weighs 16 units and upgrades on the standard Titanite path. Interesting to note on this weapon, it has 160 counter strength. The moveset is very similar to the Grand Lance. and it can also do the shield poke. Up next we have the Bone Fist. It requires 15 strength and 30 dexterity. It has a base physical damage of 14, but scales A with strength and B with dexterity. It weighs 1 unit and upgrades on the Twinkling Titanite path. It also boasts a counter strength of 150 and a very unique fighting stance, with a combination as well as a flying kick maneuver. It's very interesting and very unique. Moving on, we have the Sorcerer's Twinblade. This requires 20 strength, 30 dexterity, and 20 in both intelligence and faith. This has a base magic damage of 67, as well as 67 dark damage. It scales E with strength and E with dexterity, and weighs a fairly hefty 10 units. It upgrades on the standard Titanite path, and its strong attacks act as a catalyst for sorcery. The cast speed on this is 100, and instead of a parry, it has an interesting spin attack instead. Our next catalyst is the Retainer's Staff. This requires 18 intelligence and has a base magic and dark damage of 230. This has no scaling and weighs 2.5 units. It upgrades on the standard Titanite path and has a cast speed of 80. It can cast both magic and dark magic that require a staff. Next is Azal's Staff. This requires 35 intelligence and 18 faith. It has a base magic damage of 133 and an additional 133 dark. It scales S with magic and dark. This weighs 4 units and upgrades on the Twinkling Titanite path. It has an extremely slow cast speed at 30, but it's very powerful. It casts sorceries as well as dark magic cast with the staff. Our only bow in the DLC is the twin-headed Greatbow. It requires 25 strength and 15 dexterity, has a base physical damage of 185 with an A strength scaling. This weighs 15 units and upgrades on the Twinkling Titanite path. Other than its looks, it's a fairly standard Greatbow. We have 4 new shields in this DLC, starting off with the Rampart Golem Shield. This requires 19 strength and has a C scaling in strength and an E scaling in dexterity. It boasts a very high elemental defense at 90 each, and 80 defense against stasis effects. It has a measly 65 in physical defense and weighs 8 units. This upgrades on the standard Titanite path, but has extremely low durability. The Charred Loyce Shield is next, with a strength requirement of 12 and a dexterity requirement of 16. This scales C with dexterity, D with magic, and D with fire. It boasts a fairly high fire defense at 80, but all the other stats are equal to or less than 55. But to make up for that, it does have a health regeneration ability built into it. It weighs 5 units and upgrades on the standard Titanite path. Rounding out our standard weapons, we have the Vessel Shield. This requires 20 strength, 17 dexterity, and 8 in both intelligence and faith. It has descaling in both strength and dexterity, and does not have any notable defense stat. But it does add 1 vigor, 1 endurance, 1 adaptability, 1 intelligence, and 1 faith. It also adds 4 strength and 4 dexterity. This weighs 7 units and upgrades on the standard Titanite path. Moving to the boss soul equipment, we have first the Loyce Shield. This requires the soul of Zalin and 1,200 souls with Ornifex the Weaponsmith. It requires 12 strength and 15 dexterity, has a C scaling in dexterity and a D scaling in magic. It boasts a fairly decent magic defense at 80, but all the others are equal to or under 60. Like its Charred counterpart, this also gives you health regen with a weight of 5 units and upgrades on the Titanite path. The Ivory Greatsword is made with the soul of Ava and 8,000 souls with Weaponsmith Ornifex. It requires only 6 strength but 40 dexterity, has a base physical damage of 212 with no scaling. This weighs 0.5 units and upgrades on the Petrified Dragonbone path. Something to note about this weapon is that it's purely physical even though it looks magical, but it also loses durability with every single swing. And has a very unique overhead heavy attack. Next is the Loyce Greatsword. This requires the Soul of Lude and 3,000 souls with Weaponsmith Ornifex. It requires 25 strength and 28 dexterity. It has a base physical damage of 176 with an E in strength scaling and a C in dexterity scaling. It weighs 8 units and upgrades on the Twinkling Titanite path. The moveset is fairly basic for this type of sword. Now we have the Ivory King Ultra Greatsword. This requires the Soul of the Ivory King and 5,000 souls for Weaponsmith Ornifex. It requires 30 strength and 30 dexterity, has a base physical damage of 230 and 93 bleed added onto that. It scales with a D in strength and a B in dexterity. Weighing in at 14 units, this upgrades on the Petrified Dragonbone path. The one-handed moveset is very similar to that of the Zweihander, but two-handing this weapon really unlocks its potential. Two-handing the weapon gives all the attacks a magic aura added to them. Our last weapon for this DLC is the Eleum Loyce. This requires a Soul of the Silent Oracle and 12,000 souls to Weaponsmith Ornifex. It requires 18 strength, 27 dexterity, and 14 faith. It has a base physical damage of 137 with 40 bleed added onto that. It scales at an E with strength and an S with dexterity, and weighs 3.5 units. This is a fairly basic slashing weapon except for the strong attacks. This is a weapon that's only good for light attacks unless you want to heal someone, because all the strong attacks from this weapon, if made contact to an ally, it will heal them. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time.